Welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. You know me as Sam. You know my partner, James Anir. How are you today, good buddy?
Fantastic, Sam. How are you?
Man, it's a beautiful day in Austin. Today we are going to have a discussion on limerence. Our previous discussion was entitled, Was the Unfaithful Really in Love with the Affair Partner? And limerence is a pretty polarizing topic. You did such a fantastic job talking about it, talking through it. Today, we are answering a question that I have not seen a lot of people answer in the podcasting social media space. I could be wrong, but I'm really excited about it. And today, we're answering the question, can the damage from limerence ever be repaired? So, as a quick review, why don't you remind everybody what definition we're using for limerence?
So we're using a definition by the person who actually originated the term, Dorothy Tenov, in the 1970s. And for those who are younger, that was an awfully long time ago. For those of us who were alive during that time, it doesn't seem like very long ago. The definition that she used is it's a state of intense, involuntary emotional attachment, often experienced as obsessive infatuation. So that's a nice, sort of quick but shrinky way of saying it. So let's look at it this way. It's like your brain is on dopamine overdrive, like a teenage crush on steroids, right? Where the person, the unfaithful, who's in limerence with a limerent object or another person, but we just call a limerent object for a reason because it's not really the person, it's things that they represent, it's the fantasy they represent. And when the unfaithful becomes consumed by the thoughts of this other person, they often idealize them to the point of fantasy. Now, that other person, that limerent object, may not even know about the unfaithful's obsession. It's a fantasy, though, whether they do or they don't. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later on because it has a serious effect on the relationship. It can also become all consuming. Like any obsession or compulsion, it's going to override logic, it's going to distort perception, and it's going to fuel emotional intensity. And that's often going to lead the unfaithful to prioritize that limerent connection over their committed partner, even when they never intended to be unfaithful.
Because it's not necessarily about sex.
Absolutely. Physicality, sexual attraction is often present. Actual physical sex can be, but certainly one could say that the prelude to most affairs is this limerence. What we have to look at, though, is limerence is emotional in nature. It's really about feeling seen, desired, feeling alive. And for the person who's experiencing it, it can feel really exhilarating to the point of being compulsive or feeling compulsive, like you have to, or even addicted to the object of the limerence, which would be that other person.
Now, the problem with limerence, and there's a lot of problems with it, it's devastating in nature, but it has this really dark and heavy impact on the relationship, or a term that you and I often use, coupleship.
Right.
It has this huge effect. So even if there's not a physical betrayal, it still can have massive wounding to the relationship, right?
It's because of the emotional energy that's invested elsewhere. And then you combine that with secrecy or gaslighting, and it's going to shatter the relational bond in the primary coupleship. Period. It's going to happen. There are a lot of effects on coupleship. I really like the term. Sharon and I have been using it for years. It's a much better term than relationship. It seems more connected, right? So
Right.
I love this, and it's a quote. I don't know where it came from, right? But limerence doesn't just shake a relationship, it detonates it from the inside out.
It's a beautifully descriptive statement about what happens.
We once had a client who said, anytime that I would say something that would trigger my partner was like I threw a grenade into the room.
Right.
And he's so right. So when the unfaithful enters this limerent state, the emotional fallout ripples throughout every part of their marriage or long-term relationship, whichever it is. It also ripples out into all the relationships surrounding the unfaithful who's become limerent. And it has an effect on all of it because their attention goes elsewhere. That emotional energy is all consumed by that limerent object or that other person who frankly doesn't belong in their lives. What makes this particularly painful is that most of the unfaithful who are limerent don't set out to betray their partner. They often don't even fully understand what's happening to themselves either.
Now, you used a term. I grew up in California, and in California, we dealt with, and they still do deal with smog. And you use that term to describe what's happening in the life of both parties, right?
I do. There's a reason I use smog instead of fog. A lot of people use fog, but fog is naturally occurring. And yeah, it describes it well, but smog has a toxic element to it. It's really a fog made up of all these toxic clouds. It's not fog, it's this terribly toxic smog that you cannot see through. And because of that, I don't know if you've ever driven through fog or smog, right? You know, you've got your fog lights on, but you can't see very far ahead of you. And it's very confusing to drive in. The unfaithful, the limerent partner, becomes emotionally disconnected from their spouse or long-term partner. That's just going to happen. They can't help to be because their emotional connection is going to the fantasy. Then they begin to rewrite the history of the primary coupleship, often unconsciously, so that they can justify internally their emotional attachment to someone else. For example, thoughts, which very often become vocalized, and I'm sure many betrayeds have heard this stuff, begin to surface things like, I've never really loved them. He or she doesn't understand me like they do. We've always had problems. I'm terribly sorry to the betrayed partners out there who are currently feeling triggered by this. That is what is coming up for the limerent or unfaithful partner in their head. They're justifying this because it's so difficult to reconcile the guilt of doing what they're doing and the proper connected relationship that they're supposed to be in. The problem is this comparison game that they're playing is deeply unfair. The limerent object exists within a fantasy space, not real life. The betrayed, however, exists in real life. So they're going to be judged through the lens of familiarity, parenting stress, bills, everyday life, whereas the limerent object, the affair partner, is not. And that is so unfair.
Well, it's grossly unfair, but you hit the nail right on the head. Is oftentimes we're doing this unconsciously. Now, that doesn't mean that we're off the hook. So, oh, be nice to the unfaithful and go easy. No, we're not saying that at all. It's just that they are caught in this smog. But what's really fascinating is the role reversal that happens when this smog hits the town of the relationship.
What happens is the limerence deepens, which it will because it's the hit that we're getting from that limerence, right? So what are we going to do? We like that hit. We want to feel that happy. And so what we're doing is we keep going deeper and deeper into it. So there's this flipping of the psychological roles so that the betrayed partner is recast as the enemy, the person who essentially is keeping the limerent partner from their newfound happiness. And I'm putting air quotes around happiness.
Right.
Now, the limerent object, the fantasy affair partner, becomes the rescuer, then the one who sees the unfaithful, who understands them, who reignites their passion and sets them free because they've loosed the bonds of responsibility, right? The problem, though, is that the narrative that the unfaithful is then telling themselves in this way isn't based in truth. It's based in an emotional high or dopamine and oxytocin flooding the brain by the limerence and the idealization of the fantasy object or other person that comes with it. And you can't see the other person clearly. Their flaws are going to be minimized, their good qualities are going to be magnified way beyond reality. And that's what we call a cognitive distortion. Here's the thing, it's rarely driven by malice. It feels like it to the betrayed, But it's actually rarely driven by that. It's really driven by the brain's desperate attempt to reconcile that fantasy of the limerent affair partner with the guilt of betrayal, like I was saying earlier.
What's really absolutely devastating and agonizing, I might add, to the betrayed is this is absolutely a blindside to them. They don't see it coming. It's germinating and happening behind the scenes or under the layers, and boom, out of nowhere, the betrayed male or female sit here and go, "What is happening? It's like I'm married to a different person. It's like they changed," right?
Yeah, I mean, everything to that point seemed just fine, or at least stable, right? I mean, maybe not,
Yeah.
but
Somewhat predictable.
yeah, predictable. And then suddenly their partner's emotionally gone, distant, cold, sometimes even hostile. And they're like, what is going on here? What changed? And even though that emotional affair partner may not even know about the unfaithful's obsession, it's going to feel exactly the same to the betrayed, one way or the other. And that is, they're going to feel it or take it in as a traumatic betrayal, period. Even if the quote affair partner isn't even actually involved with the unfaithful. So
Right.
it's going to feel that way because they're gone and there's no apparent reason for it. These emotional affairs or these intense fantasy attachments to others are frequently going to be minimized by the unfaithful. So it'll be phrased as, oh, it's just a friendship or nothing physical is going on. But that's minimization. We all know about the ISIS, right? They minimize, the rationalize, intellectualize, and so on. None of that is good. The way to tell, though, is that emotional intensity of the unfaithful toward the limerent object is extremely high. So it's going to tell a different story than the, oh, we're just friends. The
Yeah.
betrayed partner then is going to feel something, a lot of things that they have already know about: deep emotional abandonment, anxiety, confusion, self doubt, loss of safety and trust in the relationship. They're going to suffer from comparison with this fantasy, which, again, not a fair comparison because you're dealing with a fantasy, not reality. And then what results from all of that is a diminished self worth, which has often been described by partners that we've worked with as like a psychological earthquake.
So as we keep going in this direction, then to try and think that a unfaithful who's in limerence and a betrayed is going to have any semblance of intimacy or attachment is just unrealistic, right?
Well, certainly not secure attachment. There's going to be fear, there's going to be avoidance. There can even be at some point dismissal on the part of the unfaithful. Dismissive attachment's very, very difficult for the person on the dismissive end. There's also going to be the fear and the avoidance. So we got to keep that in mind. It's going to change the attachment style immediately and very strongly. It really obliterates emotional intimacy in the coupleship, which is going to create emotional withdrawal. It's going to create passive aggressive resentment. That could be from both sides, honestly. We unfaithful are unfortunately renowned for passive aggressive resentment, and it's really ugly when you finally see it and own it. There's going to be decreased sexual desire between the couple. Why not? One is fantasizing about somebody else, and the other is feeling horribly rejected. There's an avoidance of communication because how do you bridge this gap? How do you talk about what's going on when even the unfaithful may not be able to see what's going on, much less own it? Overall heightened defensiveness and secrecy. And by secrecy here, of course, on the part of the unfaithful, we know what that means. They're going to hide this as much as possible. And on the part of the betrayed, it's going to be more along the lines of privacy, where they're feeling all these feelings, but are scared to share them with somebody that they don't know if they're going to be able to respond in a caring and compassionate way.
And it's about this time that we unfaithful move into what we call the justification phase, where we start to mount an assault to justify what's going on inside of us because we're typically not healthy We're typically not connected with ourselves, and we typically aren't doing really intense work with a coach, therapist, helper of any sorts. We're kind of in our own world. Is that safe to say?
Oh, very safe to say. A, even if we are working with somebody at this point, we're probably not talking about it. And they're probably not, even if we are, they're probably not going to be trained in this. Because if there
Right.
are regular therapists, so to speak, they'll be working on it with us, going, okay, let's work on this unhappiness and such. But they're not going to be looking at the unfaithful and betrayed piece of it, typically. I know what used to go through my head were things like, or thoughts like, I deserve to be happy. These are ways that I justified it. I've suffered in silence for years. This is still part of that vilification of the betrayed. This is the first time I've really felt alive. This must be destiny. So all those thoughts helped me and are helping the unfaithful, the limerent partner, silence that cognitive dissonance that we've been talking about that comes with betraying somebody they might actually still deeply care about, but not want to admit that to themselves anymore. Here's a key piece. So, you unfaithful who are looking at this, most often when we unfaithful are in a limerent state, we genuinely believe that we're falling out of love with our partner, when in reality, what we've done is simply fallen into a neurochemical illusion with someone else.
It's beautiful verbiage. It's a neurochemical illusion. But we unfaithful are so unhealthy. We don't know it. And we don't typically want to tell anybody about it because we know secretly they're probably going to put us to test and go, hold on here, let's talk about this. So we carry it inside of us without anybody knowing about it. And then ultimately, there, you call it a wall of disconnection starts to emerge between partners.
By this stage, the coupleship or primary relationship is often going through a total communication breakdown. There's repeated emotional withdrawal, and that's going to be on both sides. Because if you look at it, you've got one who can't tolerate being emotionally connected because they can't justify that with their other emotional connection. And you've got the other, the betrayed, who cannot afford to be emotionally connected. So they're going to withdraw. There's going to be the defensiveness we talked about before. There is possibly going to be hostility. And that can go both ways also. One, with the unfaithful, it's a giant pushing away so that I can be with my fantasy over here. And the other is going to be, what are you doing? Look what you're doing to me. This hurts. Why are you not? So this hostility starts to grow between the two people in the coupleship. And a betrayed partner can often feel like they're trying to reach out to somebody who's like behind this locked door. And in many ways, they really are. So that limerent smog doesn't just affect memory and judgment and clarity over what is going on, it also affects identity in both parties.
And here's where we get to the crux of the matter. We firmly believe that limerence can be repaired. We believe the effects of limerence can be healed and repaired. We, beyond a shadow of a doubt, want you, the listener, the viewer, to know it can be healed, but it comes down to each partner has a role to play in the healing of the limerence, right?
It does. So we're going to look at what each individual can do and then what the couple can do together. The first thing to say is you are not, as a couple, going to go back to how things were. If a couple wants to rebuild, it means creating a new relationship, not going back to how things were. This new relationship has to be one with greater honesty, intimacy, and alignment. We'll get to that. But here's how the process begins. The unfaithful, the limerent partner, has to end that limerent connection with the fantasy, with the other person if they're actually in contact with them. If healing's to happen, that fantasy has to be released. That sounds simple. It is simple, but it isn't easy because that
No.
thing's going to keep popping up in your head, man. But every single time it does, you got to work it. So use that 3 second thing we talked about, not lingering for 3 seconds, 3 seconds to begin and finish the change in your brain to focusing on your partner. In order to release that fantasy, it means you've got to cut off all contact, close the escape hatch. And you got to be really rigid about that. Get professional help to understand the why. Because if you don't understand the why, it's what drives the bus. If the why is driving the bus, you're going to keep doing the same thing no matter how hard you're trying to push that bus into another lane. It's not going to happen because it's too powerful. So you've got to understand the why. It's too difficult to sort through and understand all of that, the unmet childhood needs, the emotional avoidance, the unresolved wounds from which limerence arises without help. You've got to have somebody who can take that step back, see it objectively, and know what to do with it to help you. Next, you got to own the impact. Take full responsibility for the pain it's caused to your partner and to your relationship, and not just explain it away. That's a foundational step in repair.
I think that's exceptional because we as Unfaithful have to have some level of emotional maturity to get help. We have to take action. To think that this problem is going to figure itself out or just go away and we're going to white knuckle it is never going to work. But this is delicate. What can the betrayed do?
So this is way too brief, but we only have a certain amount of time. First thing is honor your emotions. This kind of betrayal is trauma, period. You are not overreacting, and it's really necessary to grieve what was because you believed in that. You were fully in on that. It's something that is lost, and it's something that you need to grieve for. And it's essential to go through your own trauma recovery, which is no small or short thing. So you have to be patient with yourself as well. Next thing, reclaim your reality. Journaling, support groups, individual therapy, those can help restore a sense of clarity and self-trust. Whatever the future is for your relationship, you get to decide, and you need to decide from a place of empowerment, self-empowerment, because the betrayal can steal all of your power. And so this is so important to rebuild, actually build anew that self-empowerment. You are still who you were. It's reclaiming that and restoring that power that you had and even blossoming and growing into more. So whether to stay or go should come from a grounded place, not panic or pressure.
And I love the picture of reclaiming your reality because as a betrayed, when you encounter limerence or a physical affair, your whole reality is changed. You are wondering about this, you're wondering about that. You feel like you're living on quicksand. You can't get your footing about you. And then you've probably been gaslit for days, weeks, months, maybe years. And so the right expert can help you reclaim your reality and begin to stop even gaslighting yourself and be able to grab hold of firm footing because it's only on firm footing that you can make a decision that is going to be in your best interest. But make no mistake about it, to you, the betrayed, you have the agency of choice. If you don't think you have choice, man, on behalf of James and I, please get help ASAP because you do have choice. You deserve that. Now, as we transition to the couple, what can the couple do for the couple that's willing to do work? When the unfaithful says, I've got work to do, what can they do as a couple?
Commit to radical honesty. The caveat I always put in here for the unfaithful is the difference between hurt and harm. Partners can handle hurt. They deserve to know because then they can actually operate from a position of power, of reclaiming their power, because we took their power away when we betrayed. Harm, though, is something that's going to sit with them and be like a festering wound. If we cannot do that anymore, no more harming. So there is a discernment to be made here. That said, no more half-truths. We tell the truth. Healing for both of you and the coupleship requires transparency and emotional courage. A great deal of it.
I love that. I love that. I mean, transparency has to be there. And it takes emotional courage. And for the unfaithful, emotional courage, this is the only way that you can process through this destructive problem and really do it right. If you're going to be emotionally afraid, if you're going to be emotionally narcissistic, if you're going to be emotionally inept, man, you're going to do so much damage. So process through it. It's a beautiful statement of emotional courage. I just love that verbiage because that's what it takes. It takes nothing less than that to walk through this.
It really does. And you know what? When you're walking through it, it's kind of like walking through a swamp. If you go with a guide who knows that swamp, they're going to be able to say, okay, that tuft of grass there, that's solid. That one over there, no, you're going to sink up to above your head in that quicksand. So you need that person who can take you by the arm and say, okay, this next step you can take, and then you can take that step. They don't even have to take it before you because you have to be able to trust them. And to be
Yeah.
able to trust them, the first thing you're going to need is a therapist or coach who you know is trained in betrayal trauma. So somebody trained at APSATS or ITAP. Those people know what they're doing with betrayal trauma. Somebody who's experienced it and worked through it with another professional and has become a professional themselves. Always check those credentials because a lot of people will just talk a good game and they don't really know what they're doing. They think they can apply regular trauma work to this and they can't. It's a very specific kind of trauma work. The next thing would be rebuilding intimacy. So that includes emotional closeness, shared meaning, shared rituals, shared goals. And eventually, notice I put in eventually, physical connection. Why eventually? Because only when safety has been reestablished. And guess what, partners? You get to guide that. The next piece would be create a new story. There's this narrative that has been built around the limerence, around the betrayal, that doesn't have to be the story that moves forward. In fact, if you're going to build new, you have to create new stories. So just as a for instance, those places where maybe this was all going on and you had a wonderful memory of being at that location on vacation or whatever it was. Okay, now what was my partner doing then? Now that's undermined. So it's really essential to recreate that story. So that comes from ownership by the unfaithful of how I destroyed that or undermined that memory, and eventually reworking that memory, maybe even by going to the same place and reworking it and reestablishing a new story there. That's just one possibility. You're not trying to fix that old relationship when you're creating this new story. So you're actually getting to design a new one. You get to actually work together, collaborate to design what this new relationship is going to look like with updated values, boundaries, and shared meaning.
When I was doing my training with Rick Reynolds and working for him for quite some time, I saw him navigate some really tough situations. And I'll never forget something that he said to me. And he still uses it to this day, and I use it too in really difficult moments because I'm sure that there's many unfaithful that might be like, no, you don't understand. It's not like that, or it's like this, or I'm different, right? We unfaithful are masters at being different. We're terminally unique. We're always, well, it's not like that. I'm different. I'm different. So, to all of you that are courageously listening or watching as an unfaithful, I would like to use a line that changed my life that I hope that someone has the guts to use it with you. And it goes like this. On behalf of James and I, we would like you to consider the possibility that perhaps this is limerence and not love. We would like you to consider the possibility that maybe you're not firing on all cylinders. And maybe you've given yourself over to a belief that this person could be the answer when in reality, could you really consider the possibility that you've been wrong before? And if you would simply consider that possibility, that might spark some real interest in getting some help before you make a decision that could change your life and your partner's life for the rest of your lives. So, getting help somewhere from experts is absolutely vital. So, James, what's interesting is you and Sharon will offer consultations to see if an intensive is right for them. So, if a couple or an individual, and that's another thing to remind people about, is you do individual intensives as well. So, if they want to set up a consultation to see if that's for them, how do they do that?
You would email our office manager, Gail, at info@hope, HOPE, for us, FORUS.com. So info@hopeforus.com, and she will get back to you with some details. And what about you, Sam? How do they get in touch with you?
I'm honored to get the work that I do. And you and I do this podcast. I've had you on my own independent podcast before that I love to do. We do this because we love doing it.
Yeah.
And we're sharing our contact information because, man, we could talk for hours about the mistakes that we've
Huh.
made. And we love doing what we do because we take great joy, pride, fulfillment in helping people not make the same mistakes that we make. You can reach out to me at samshealingpodcast@gmail.com. We're so grateful for each and every one of you. We'd love for you to subscribe, leave a comment, like and follow. You can also reach out to us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com if you've got topics that you want us to talk about in the future, or if you're looking for help. We're just honored to be a voice in your life. So we'll see you next time on Ask the Unfaithful.